Welcome back to Doctors Teach. This is the podcast that believes your remediation plan should be built on actual data, not vibes and faculty gut feelings. So today's topic, yep, you guessed it, baseline data. You can't build a plan if you don't know where you're starting. But somehow, baseline in many programs means I feel like they're struggling. They didn't do great on one rotation, or my personal favorite, there were some concerns, but I don't remember the details. Nope, not today. Let's fix it. All right, let's talk about why baseline data matters. So, baseline data isn't optional, it's really the foundation of your entire remediation plan. What it does is tell you, number one, where the resident is starting from, which competencies are affected, and how you'll know if they're improving. If you don't know what's broken, how exactly are you planning to fix it? So, it's really your starting point. It sets the foundation for your entire plan. And if you don't have that baseline, there's no way you can measure growth. This is something I say frequently in my own remediation work groups is bad baseline data equals bad plans. So things like those gut feelings or one evaluation that's not so good or not very positive, it doesn't necessarily equal a pattern. And low vibe doesn't mean a low milestone. So let me just give you a few examples of what doesn't count as baseline data. I just have a feeling they're not where they should be, or their surgery eval wasn't great, or everyone seemed annoyed when they're on service. While this all may be very, very true, those are actually red flags that data might be needed, not the data itself. So if your remediation plan starts with resident seems off, you're building a house on sand. Let's dive into that a little deeper. All right, talking about categories of strong baseline data. So what does the strong baseline data even look like? So really you want a mix of direct observation from faculty. Honestly, direct observation is king in my world. I encourage all of our faculty to do as much direct observation as possible and then document it. Objective metrics like in-training exam scores, those are great baseline data that can show medical knowledge deficiencies. In some instances, with some questions, it can show application of medical knowledge. You've got your multi-source feedback, meaning your nurses, their co-residents, and even patients. I love to ask patients after a clinic encounter or an encounter in the hospital, like, hey, did Dr. So-and-so meet your expectations? What did they do for you? Or were you satisfied with the care they provided? And a lot of times that information is really, really helpful. And then never discount a self-assessment from the resident. So putting all of those baseline data together, it really gives you a 360 view, not just from one person's opinion after 2 half days of clinic, right? It gives you a really solid foundation to be able to say, all right, I can start to see some of the patterns in this resident's performance. In my own program, what I like to see is that we're using a variety of data from different faculty, but I don't want to make any sort of decisions based on fewer than 9 data points. So that's just a rule of thumb that I like to follow. If you don't have at least 9 data points, then you need to go back to the drawing board. Like I said before, direct observation is still the gold standard. It's king in my world, and direct observation is really your MVP here, but not just once, not just from one person. You want observations from multiple faculty across different settings if you can. So clinic, inpatient, night shift, yes, even when they're tired, and they're all tired, let's be honest. But yes, please, for the love of remediation, use a checklist. Seemed okay is not an evaluation. I can't make a decision on that type of data. And for direct observation, 9 data points, I really think that each particular faculty that provides summaries of their direct observation, I want 3 different direct observations per preceptor. So A faculty brings you a direct observation, it's a one-off. Yeah, we can start to look at that as a whole if we combine that with lots of other faculty. But I really want to see that same resident and same faculty together in multiple places and in multiple situations. That's just my rule of thumb. All right, let's talk about objective performance metrics. Bring in the numbers, basically. Your in training exams or quiz scores, things like that. Are they finished with notes on time? That can really tip you off in a lot of ways that they're struggling. Are procedure logs incomplete? Can they write a discharge summary that isn't a legal liability? Maybe at the very beginning of their PGY 1 year, maybe not so much, but by the end of their PGY 1 year, it should be a very good, succinct discharge summary and something that their patients can read and know exactly what they need to do once they leave the hospital, and that their colleagues, if they happen to see them in the clinic the next week, that they know what happened when they were in the hospital and what types of things they should be following up on. So objective metrics don't lie, and they really balance out the, well, I like them factor, right? So I think we all have, fond kind of feelings towards all of our residents, but it's awesome to just be objective and look at the metrics and let that guide everything that we do. I've talked a lot about the 360 evaluation or the multi-source feedback, but faculty don't see everything. And so that's why we need to rely on other data points. So your upper level residents, your nursing and clinic staff, or patients when appropriate. There is a time and a place where I wouldn't necessarily ask a patient, but that's always a possibility where you could get that information. Faculty don't see everything. If you want to know how the resident communicates, ask your nurses. If you want to know if they take initiative to get things done, ask the chief resident. They know. If you want to know if they're professional, ask the front desk staff who have watched them show up 12 minutes late every single day to clinic this month. So basically, the more perspectives you can get, the clearer the picture is going to be. It's just a matter of gathering information from everyone so that you have this complete picture. And yes, the front office staff can tell you a lot. Always include a resident self-assessment. I think this really is an important one. Have the resident complete that self-assessment and ask them where they think they're struggling and where they feel confident. Sometimes what they say lines up with what you've seen, and that's great. But sometimes they think they're doing really great, and you're like, are we watching the same rotation? So that's helpful too. It gives you insight into their insight or perhaps lack of it. What I've seen in my experience as a data specialist for many years is first year residents, they're not great at giving a self-assessment. And honestly, when I ask for a self-assessment, I've always got to preface that request with, hey, this isn't a trick question. I really want to know where you think you're struggling, where you think you're doing great, and what you think your opportunities for improvement are. Because what I want to do is line that up with what faculty direct observation and all of the data is telling me. And if we can start to provide you, the resident, with lots of different data and specific examples of where we think you're meeting the requirements and then missing the marks in other areas, I think that helps your self-assessment to be that much better so that by the time they get to be a third year or a fourth year, depending on your specialty's training requirements, they're usually pretty spot on by the end of it. I think that goes a long way with just giving them the information they need to be able to reconcile other people's perspectives with how they see their own performance. So yeah, big fan of a self-assessment. All right, let's just recap what strong baseline data really is. We can wrap it up with a little bit of a checklist. So you want multiple faculty with direct observation. Like I said before, direct observation in my world is king. I want at least 9 data points. And most of those data points, I would say minimum of 3 data points from each faculty if we're doing direct observation. It's a lot of work, but I think it's essential for making good decisions. We want quantitative and objective data. You want feedback from multiple sources. So pulling in your nursing staff, your upper level residents who may be supervised, just anyone that the resident has had contact with. And then insight into the resident's own perception is just really important. So those self-assessments are going to be enlightening on your part. If you're missing one of those, fill in the gap before you launch the plan. Baseline data isn't just a checkbox. It's the actual blueprint for everything that you do in your remediation plan. I think it's absolutely essential. All right, final thoughts on this whole episode. Don't start without data. Don't let one opinion outweigh 5. What I mean by that is if you have a faculty with an observation or an opinion, but the other data that you have doesn't really support it, dig deeper and don't rely on just that one-off observation. If you wouldn't build a treatment plan without labs and imaging, don't build a remediation plan without baseline data. In the next episode, we're going to talk about how programs can create a culture where remediation isn't taboo. You know the ones, written perfectly, executed poorly. Yeah, let's fix that too. As always, thank you so much for supporting my podcast. And hey, if this episode gave you something to think about before your next CCC meeting, would you mind leaving me a quick review or sending it to a colleague? We don't gatekeep around here. And if it helps your team build stronger plans, that is an absolute win. All right. And as always, thank you so much for supporting my podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, and you want more help collecting and using better data and remediation, download the free introductory lesson of the Elevate Remediation Fast Track course, or take the free remediation risk assessment at www.docmaclearning.com. Links are in the description, so grab what you need, and I'll see you in the next episode.